Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review for you all, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a crime film from the USA, English language, released in the year 2024, directed by Rose Glass, and this film is called Love Lies Bleeding. So Love Lies Bleeding is set in a very rundown community in this town. We have a woman that runs a gym that is owned by her gangster father, who has a very fearsome reputation. He has a lot of respect, but the respect is not shared by his daughter. So they have a history that has forced the daughter to cut ties with the father and actually try and make a life of her own. But while she is in this town, that dream of happiness is very distant. So one day she sees a possibility to break free of the shackles that she's under when she's introduced to a bodybuilder. Now this bodybuilder, she has aspirations of her own. She wants to compete professionally, but she has a lot of mental baggage as well. So that mental baggage is preventing her from achieving her dream, but when the two of them form the friendship, they realise they give each other strength. So quickly that friendship turns into a romance, and they realise that in order to get happiness that they deserve, they're going to have to break free and escape town. But unfortunately, the more they try to break free, the more a domino effect it has in a very negative way, and pretty soon the situation spirals out of control. So what happens at that point on? Something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Love Lies Bleeding. Rose Glass is a fantastic director. She directed a movie called St. Maud, and that was one of the most harrowing experiences that I've seen. The end of that film just stayed with me for so long, and what was so impressive about this movie is that it found beauty amongst ugliness, and so it gave it that sense of impending doom, but at the same time it made it beautiful to watch. And so that was something that I really hadn't experienced before. It's a very daring thing to do, to actually create beauty amongst ugliness and actually not glorify it, but have that strange charm to it. And so coming into Love Lies Bleeding, this is a different movie to St. Maud, and I wasn't expecting it to be as good, but I had a lot of interest coming into it because, number one, it has Kristen Stewart. Now, Kristen Stewart from Twilight, I wasn't a big fan of her until I realised that she can actually act. And so pairing her with Rose Glass, that was very interesting. And it also had Ed Harris. And so this, when I saw the trailer, I thought it looked very crime noir, it looked very 1980s, it had a very 80s vibe to it. So I thought, all right, well, that's something that's enticing. And a lot of people are actually going to go watch the film based on the fact that the trailer is very alluring. So I thought, all right, well, this is not going to be as good as St. Maud, but I was hoping that it was going to be somewhat worth it. And after watching Love Lies Bleeding, I will say that this is absolutely fantastic, and it's another example of how good Rose Glass is. Now, it's not quite as good as St. Maud, but what has in similarity is that it does find beauty amongst ugliness. This is a film that is set in a very downbeat, run-out community where the sense of hopelessness is just intensified through the soundtrack and just the way that the characters interact with each other. It's almost like everyone in this town has given up on life. And so when this bodybuilder is introduced into the movie, this is where the romance starts to blossom, and this is where the sense of beauty starts to come through to the screen. It portrays it in a way that it has that sense of hope. And when you have hope and you have characters that you can actually root for, this is what actually makes you want to trudge through the trenches with these characters. So the interest is there. I thought as though it was incredibly absorbing, just the romance that blossoms and trying to break free of the family past. And the family past is very interesting. And so this movie poses a lot of questions that need answering, and because you want to know the answers so bad, you don't really realise how long this movie goes for. So I never felt as though this movie dragged, because I always wanted to know what was going to happen, whether or not these two lovebirds were actually going to make it out of this town. So the cinematography is excellent. It has a very 1980s vibe to it. I thought as though it's a very brutal film, and so be very careful of that, especially one scene. I'm not going to give too much away, but the aftermath of that scene is absolutely terrifying. And so I thought, okay, that really sets the standard as to what the world is that the Rose Glass has created. But then you have the romance, and that romance is almost like the sugar coating on this really dark world. But the further the movie goes on, the sugar coated world is getting smaller and smaller, and it's becoming engulfed by the darkness. And so that's what Rose Glass does so well. It's just that darkness, and it's showing that, okay, in fantasy we want to see the good guys win, we want to see good overcome evil, but unfortunately in reality evil can be stronger. And so this downbeat, hopelessness that the movie creates at the start of the movie, then giving you a glimpse of hope, it's almost like it's sadistic. It's sadistically playing with your emotions, and I thought that was absolutely fantastic. The acting was phenomenal. I thought Kristen Stewart, the chemistry she had with the bodybuilder was absolutely fantastic, but the chemistry she had with Ed Harris as well was great. Ed Harris's character is not in the movie a lot, but when he's actually on the screen, I thought it really evolved the situation, evolved the plot, and it started feeding you answers to the questions that made the plot thicken. And so it's a very three-dimensional experience that I would highly recommend to anyone out there who is a fan of Rose Glass, if you like St. Maud, you're probably going to like this movie. Yes, it's a romance, but it's a different kind of romance, and so that's something that I really, really like. So it's got a lot of brutal violence, but it is sporadic violence, and so you're not quite prepared for it, so you don't have that bracing impact, and so that's something that I really, really liked, and that's something that was evident in St. Maud. And so not knowing when the violence is coming, it has you on edge, and so that whole feeling of anxiety is really intensified, and it never really lets go. And so, as I said, it's finding beauty in really ugly situations, but not promising that that ugly situation is ever going to go away. So I thought the ending was actually quite riveting, and in the end what you get is just a really impressive experience. If I have issues with the movie, there were some scenes that dragged somewhat, and I didn't feel as though they were necessary, but pushing that aside, that's a very minuscule problem in what was a very, very impressive movie to add to the collection of a very, very impressive director. If it sounds like your kind of thing, it has pretty brutal violence, it has some pretty graphic sex scenes, and so if you are easily offended, this is a movie that's not for you. But as I said, if you like the darkness of St. Maud and actually painting that darkness in a beautiful way, Love Lies Bleeding is definitely one I would recommend. As a result of that, I'm going to give this film 4 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.